It's incredible how Russia decided to launch a giant rocket so soon after SpaceX launched their Super Heavy booster. We can't claim that Russia is attempting to compete with SpaceX in orbit, but if Elon Musk gives a thought on this, he may openly demand that Russia cease copying him, just as he did with Blue Origin. And we could predict that could happen sooner if Russia continues to replicate SpaceX's space exploration rockets or techniques. So the biggest rocket we're talking about here is the NSA Super Heavy carrier rocket. And according to the Director General of Roscosmos Chief Dmitry Rogozin, the rocket would be assembled using the principle of a technological building kit, with each part of the launcher being an independent flight element, which is why they finally get to space in unity. The first launch of Russia's nationally targeted program, the NSA Super Heavy carrier rocket, is scheduled for 2028. Russia plans to create a Super Heavy carrier rocket launch pad at the Vostochny spaceport in Russia's Far East. They also want to utilize the new rocket for trips to the moon, including the landing of Russian cosmonauts on the surface of the Earth's natural satellite. According to Roscosmos, the NSA rocket will be able to transfer a 27-ton cargo to the moon's orbit. Therefore, Russia's recently released Super Heavy rocket is likely to continue transporting huge tons of payload to Earth's orbit. Welcome to TechSpace. Stay with us as we explore the biggest Russia's newly released Super Heavy rocket that will soon be launched to space. You might not want to miss the sight of the type of power engine used in this type of rocket that enables it lift 3 separate parts of individual rocket into orbit at once. Here's what we know about Russia's big dreams for a bigger rocket. Russian President Vladimir Putin signed off on Russia's next big rocket barely days before Elon Musk's powerful Falcon Heavy soared into the sky. Roscosmos has been waiting for approval for years, giving the space agency the chance to construct something known as Super Tiage, translated from Russian engineer jargon meaning a really big rocket. Roscosmos revealed that the rocket's primary developer will be the RKK Energia firm, which is in charge of Russia's human spaceflight. RKK's Progress, situated in the southern city of Samara, where Soyuz rockets are manufactured, will serve as a key contractor on the project. This is also the same company that worked on the Soviet N-1 moon rocket and the massive Energia mega rocket in the 1980s. Unlike the ill-fated crash-prone N-1, the Energia successfully flew twice, in 1987 and 1988. The second accomplishment was the launch of the Buran orbiter, the Soviet equivalent of the space shuttle. The unpiloted 100-ton glider then completed a fully automated landing on the runway, completing the Soviet space program's final feat before the collapse of the USSR in 1991. Since the fall of the Soviet Union, Russian space engineers have fantasized of recreating the powerful Energia, or possibly designing an even better rocket to revive their glories. They were on the verge of resuming the project in early 2014 when an ambitious lunar exploration mission was supposed to become a new great national objective in the warm wake of Sochi Winter Olympics. While Russia remained in rocket limbo, other major space firms continued to build. For example, SpaceX created the Falcon Heavy and has ambitions to build an even larger BFR. NASA was working on the SLS, and China has expressed an interest in developing one of the huge rockets. The Kremlin has realized that the moment has come to reconsider its own great rocket plans too. It's probable that signing approval on the Super Heavy rocket on the eve of the Falcon Heavy launch is a coincidence. Nonetheless, it demonstrates Moscow's ambition to catch up to the burgeoning space competition. However, this brave and costly action comes at a pivotal point in Russia's space program, where an unbroken succession of failures, years-long project delays, and corruption scandals may indicate ongoing failure in the Russian space sector. So far, all efforts to mend the mess have shown mixed results, and Russia's space exploration dilemma may soon grow into a source of controversy, especially given Russia's uphill struggle in the international launch market. To avoid biting off more than they can chew, Roscosmos' approach calls for a stepwise path to the super rocket. First, by 2022, a medium-class launcher called the Soyuz 5 will be constructed using commercial engines. The next phase is to connect numerous Soyuz 5 booster stages to build the foundation of the massive rocket. If all goes as planned, the huge rocket will launch in 2028. Without an ambitious and costly human space travel project, the super rocket may go in the footsteps of its Soviet predecessors. Here's how Russia's Roscosmos space company rebirthed their Super Heavy rocket we are talking about. According to Russia's space company Roscosmos, if properly tested and ready for flight, its Super Heavy rocket will be capable of transporting at least 35 tons of cargo into Earth's orbit. However, from the insight of other space cooperation, a Super Heavy rocket can be said to be a space vehicle capable of transporting at least 50 tons or more of payload to orbit. Other rockets, such as the Apollo-era Saturn V, could transport up to 140 tons into low Earth orbit, allowing NASA to carry out its daring moonshots in the 60s. 5 decades later, super rockets are back in favor as the sole realistic means of launching major human exploration missions, unless space elevators or photon engines make significant technological advances in the next decades. Currently, NASA and other commercial space firms, SpaceX and Blue Origin, are building bigger rockets, which outnumber Russia's 35-ton Super Heavy barrier. China is also working on a vehicle dubbed the Long March 9 that will be capable of transporting more than 100 tons. So, the Russia's 35-ton rocket isn't coming to claim a superior position in the space game. Rather, after having ceded numerous space frontiers to the US, Europe, China, and India in the past 2 decades, they needed something to show that they are still capable to meet up the new global space race. The Energia's core body is a Zeppelin-shaped tandem of 2 tanks carrying cryogenically chilled liquid oxygen and hydrogen propellant. The tanks fuel a quartet of super powerful engines, which provide the majority of the push with the 9-minute journey to orbit. 4 kerosene-burning strap-on boosters are attached to the sides of the core stage to assist with liftoff, but are subsequently ejected approximately 2 minutes into the flight. NASA adopted a similar architecture for their SLS Super Heavy lift rocket, except that the kerosene boosters were replaced with a pair of solid rockets inherited from the Space Shuttle program. However, a decade later, the Energia's components were just too large to transport in a country considerably smaller and less prosperous than the Soviet Union. While it may seem strange to downsize rocket boosters while erecting the large rocket, the cluster concept does have some distinct advantages. The main advantage is that each individual rocket may also be combined to construct a medium-sized space vehicle capable of launching far smaller but more realistic money-making missions, such as communication satellites. In reality, Russian scientists accomplished just that, nicknaming the resulting rocket the Irtish after a river in Siberia. Roscosmos could utilize the same factories, technology, and personnel to produce bigger rocket boosters for commercial, military, and scientific missions, with the Yenisei and the smaller Irtish, distributing costs over the whole rocket family. So the major concern that may be ringing on our mind right now is if Russia has the capability to manufacture super heavy rockets. Here's a simple thought for an answer. On paper, Russia's latest path to super rocket looks and sounds fantastic, but there are big issues that the theoretical possible scenario can be executed in reality, let alone in only 8 years. Russia's track record of keeping large space commitments is kind of polluted, since the country has been living in the shadow of a vast heritage from the Soviet Union. They ran a diversified fleet of rockets of various sizes, which was mostly supported by substantial economic and scientific collaboration with the West. The majority of Russia's joint effort were formed under Boris Yeltsin's presidency in the 1990s. So right now, we are not certain if Russia could still meet up their technology assertions, though we all know that they are badass in creating military weapons. With what you've known now, do you think Russia has the capacity to build the biggest rocket that could outsmart SpaceX Starship? Please do well to share your thoughts in the comment section below. Until next time, please like, share, subscribe, and while you're still around, why don't you click on one of those flashing videos on the screen for more content?